Welcome to VaynerBox, the show where we discuss your ideas. I'm Bambi Francisco, and joining me as always is Ezra Roizen, digital media investment banker and VaynerBox regular, and our guest host for today, Brian Singerman, who is a venture capitalist at the Founders Fund, and Brian is also part of the Google Mafia. That is, Brian has been an angel investor for the past 3 years, but he's a former Google employee engineer, right?
That's
is that right? And today we are going to be looking at web analytics. And we're going to cover a few topics. How is the pitch? Is the idea novel? Is there a business here? And what are the challenges? And the two of you are going to help me figure that out about these companies. So we're going to start with Nuconomy. Nuconomy is an Israeli-based next-generation web analytics company that's trying to measure engagement and contribution on websites.
Cool. Hi, guys. My name is Shahan Ahmad. I'm from Nuconomy, CEO and founder. First of all, thanks for all of you who stayed until this time and this, the day. I know it's hard. It was hard also for us. My message for you is the first thing you need to do when you go out of this room in this conference is to learn to say goodbye. Bye-bye page view model. Bye-bye click model. I know it's been a cool model. We all liked it. It helped us to measure ourselves. But it's time to say it's dead. Really, page views are dead. It's not useful anymore.
Definitely catchy. Great pitch. Great way to start it.
Absolutely.
I think that I think it's obviously overstated for the sense of drama that the page view model is dead. I don't think the page view model is completely dead. But I do think the question of engagement and what the sources of engaged audiences is a really interesting topic. I think the question of, one of the points he makes about if you're looking at your analytics and you're looking at just sort of where the masses are coming from, it's not necessarily telling you that these are your best audience, just telling you where lots of them are coming from. If you can take that and see who comments the most, who can post the most blogs, who contributes the most content, who participates the most, who comes back the most, and what are the sources of that segment of your audience, which is the really high-powered group,
right.
I think that actually begins to give you all kinds of new views on the actual utility of what's going on the site.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Right.
And page views, one way that page views are kind of dead is that in terms of the eyeball model is starting to, be a little bit shaky, and people are looking for ways to actually monetize your site, and not thinking of this just in terms of page views, but thinking of this in terms of like, how am I going to make a business out of my site?
Right.
Is kind of come full circle back to this, but that is the most important thing. On some sites, that'll be page views and brand advertising and CPM model, and on some sites, that's going to be like where the community builders is talking about, where the subscription model, or where is this and that. What you want to know what people are doing with your site,
right.
And to try and monetize that way.
It's definitely a trend. I remember talking to Max Levchin, and he said that he's on Madison Avenue and trying to convince them to focus on, I guess, CPE, like cost per engagement, and not CPM. And it's still hard. It's still hard. We don't have analytics, and companies like this that could help us capture the engagement and contribution, I think would be really helpful for advertisers as well as publishers.
Well, I think, Max, or I was talking to someone else who was talking to another friend of ours who was a big web publisher, and he was just saying that the data they have on their consumers is so far beyond what the ad people are prepared to even to utilize in terms of buys. It's like, we can give you 19 data points on our users, and the guy's like, well, we do men and women.
Right.
We can do that.
That being said, Max was successful in doing it.
No, I think the point is, they're going to get there, and he's going to educate them. And the big publishers will drag the advertisers into this game. But the reality is, where the sort of cutting-edge folks are in terms of the amount they know about their consumers is so far beyond the ad industry's ability to actually input targeted ads for that group.
Right.
That's correct. And in terms of engagement, in terms of finding out what people are actually doing at your site, trying to figure out an actual ad model to target those people while they're engaging with the site is definitely going to be tricky as well. Yeah. But it's a huge goldmine, because how much more targeted can you get than what you're actually doing right now?
Yeah, I think we definitely need it. We do not want to look at our page views. We do videos, and we don't even have a site, an analytics company that can help us show our video views. And if you can show, particularly if you have a niche, highly targeted audience base, you can't look at page views. You've got to look at activity.
I think there are some sites which are just massive volume sites which are going to have page view models, and as Brian said, I think that there are lots of places where page views isn't the ultimate model, where it's really about the engagement of the actual consumer or the user, and how do you develop ways of understanding what they're doing, how to attract more of the good ones, and how to monetize their involvement. I think that is where a lot of publishers are going to go. And you know, at the end of the day, optimizing simply for page views actually degrades the user experience in many cases, because people are actually doing things to create more page views.
Right.
And that actually is you know, I think counter to what everybody wants to accomplish.
But then again, it's an easy model for advertisers to understand. It's just like, well, I see I have eyeballs. Okay, well, the more of those. But
and it's not just time spent online. He says that, you know, you shouldn't even be looking at the time spent online, because he spent, if you watch the pitch, he says that he spent all his time on Expedia trying to fill out a form, and he spent like 10 minutes,
which
and
is
they're like, you know,
those numbers when it's just
and it's not that your site is actually useful. It's that your site is actually a problem, a challenge for users, and so he actually believes that you shouldn't be looking at the time spent online. There should be other things.
So I think this guy gets the problem. I think it is a real problem. I think the trick is, can he make a big company out of this, which is a trickier problem.
Okay, so can he make? Would you? What would you
sure.
say?
The question is just, I mean, the question is just in the implementation here. How do you really give users the data that they actually need on their site, and how do we then convert that into metrics that, you know, as Ezra was pointing out, the new economy doesn't fully get yet. I mean, so it seems to me to be an adoption problem. Like it totally is a great idea, and it's totally how we need to move. But how do you get everybody to kind of?
What's the business model here? Do they charge publishers? Do they charge? What do you think the model is?
I think the business model is to create a really cool product, get acquired by Google. Honestly, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you need to have something. It's tough to monetize.
Or
it's
Facebook.
tough to get people to spend.
Which needs,
I mean,
companies like Facebook and Slide, companies that actually do a lot more engaging or provide a platform for engagement, they may need a company.
But his point is, I'm actually trying to go below. He says, no, I'm trying not to be amateur and so on and so forth, that I'm trying to go below the radar to some degree of the big buyers. And the trick becomes, if you're going to go to that SME market, and the small publisher market, they're incredibly cheap. And so it's hard to get people to spend money
competition.
In that
well, absolutely. The competition right now seems to be in a lot of there's a whole new crop of people doing analytics for iPhones and analytics for, you know, this and that. And in terms of the new economy, in terms of analyzing what you are actually doing on the site, I've seen a couple of you know, companies with this idea. Nothing that's taken it to the level that he's talking about, though.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, he has $3.3 million in funding.
Yeah,
so
and I think it's a great idea.
It's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea. He'll probably figure out a way to monetize it. My guess is he's really good at figuring out what people are doing on his site and where the good customers are coming from. So he probably has a way of looking behind the curtains and figuring it out.
One way of monetizing this, and I'm sure he's talked about, is ways that, like, any site that's actually using this product can get better targeted ads, because they can do cross-site targeting and just all kinds of stuff like that.
Well, I'll tell you, as a site, as a publisher trying to capture engagement, we could do it. We can capture engagement, but it just takes a lot of time.
Yes.
So something like this is actually very useful.
You still don't necessarily know exactly what to do with that data.
Right.
And how, and exactly figuring out what the next step is. Like, once you know that data, like, still, how do you monetize it, right?
Okay, so we like this company. Okay, next one is actually very similar to this company. It's a little bit different. It's called Clicktail. Probably not as far along as New Economy. So Clicktail is another web analytics company that focuses on users and how they're interacting with your website.
Clicktail is a brand new way for websites to understand their users' behavior. Okay? We show movies of how users actually behave inside your website, as well as aggregate these movies in a way that gives you insight that you can't get in any other way. Okay? Today, most websites are black boxes. Most websites use traditional web analytics, which show you statistics, that is numbers. You can see where people come from, where they go, but you don't really know how they behave inside the page.
He's trying to be articulate, and that's great, but I think he's going a little bit too slow. One thing to note that I found in terms of pitching to VCs is that you kind of need to be able to make a pitch that's going to then withstand all the barrage of questions that are going to come at you. And so articulate is great, but you know, you need to speed it up a little bit.
Yeah,
I would say generally from a pitching standpoint, spending a lot of time on the other side with clients, working with folks who are pitching, people don't appreciate the fact that most of your idea is already actually known and understood by your audience, and it's just this relatively small amount of marginal new information that they're trying to figure out what it is that you're actually saying that's new or different. And if you can basically assume to a VC audience, different than a consumer audience may not get any of it, they're going to get 90% of what you're saying sort of out of the gate.
You don't have to educate them too much.
No one ever looks at the marketing slides for the most part. You got to have it, but they're not going to spend time on it. They're going to say, get me to what you do, specifically it's different. Give me the exact, the 10% that's unique and novel, and let's focus on that.
That's why I like the other pitch. Unfortunately, I'm going to mention it here, but I did like Shahar's pitch where he said, page views are dead. That's what captures you. Maybe he should have.
Right. I mean, this guy needs to, like, in terms of capturing a VC audience, they're kind of going to be, they look at pitches all day.
Right.
They're going to be just, not, you know, they're going to want to just get to the point.
Right.
So now on the idea, I think that for this company, the trick is, I mean, there's lots of different views on analytics, and so many different people are coming up with, Brian said, iPhone and different ways of looking at how people are, engagement or page views or video views or whatever it may be. Lots of ways of looking at how you understand consumption. I think that the
contribution
is in the last one, but I think in this case, this is an interesting model, but for me, it's going to be interesting, what are the actual applications? So if I'm looking at one user, for example, in their thread, that's informative in a very specific kind of context, but it's not aggregate. So the thing that jumped to me, and I mentioned to you, Bambi, was design. I think it's a really interesting application for designers, and I would actually think about, if I was A/B testing new models, I would say, how do I basically look at specific click-flow traffic and look at the movies of how people are dropping off and whatever.
And the mouse interaction.
And the mouse action. I'm not so sure it works on aggregate analytics side.
You're not looking at enough data when you're looking at one user going through a site. It is absolutely perfect. It's exactly what people do for A/B testing, what UI designers do for A/B testing. And in fact, this may be an even better way of doing that. But it's just not, you're not trying to visualize a single user. You're trying to visualize the masses of users and what's happening. And this doesn't give you the...
Well, it does give you an aggregate view, but the problem I see is that Google Analytics gives you an aggregate view. So the difference or the novelty here is that they actually give you a movie and they show you how people are interacting with individuals are interacting.
And I think it comes back to the sort of feature company debate that's raged or gone on for since the beginning of technology, which is this company a feature or is it a company, or is this idea, and is this really a really awesome feature of Omniture or some other big product that's out there that's basically doing analytics, and now this is the design platform, and do these guys focus really on owning that niche, or do they basically try to flip this into a bigger, broader application?
It's a visualization piece, right? I mean, the difference here is visualization. Do they have the same, the questions come, do they have the same meat as something like Google Analytics? Is it as easy for somebody who's not a designer, but somebody who's actually trying to analyze data, like, to consume that data? And even if that it's a better way of consuming that data, is that a full, can you deploy this particular product to all of these sites as opposed to some of the more entrenched companies?
Right.
Yeah, and you also have to think about, again, just from a marketing standpoint, what's the category of site and consumer, on the business side that's going to want to buy
the engineers,
product?
the designers.
Is it the engineers? Is it the marketing? Because most of these things are done by marketing.
I don't know
folks.
if it's marketing. Is
it
marketing?
Designers? Who is it that basically says this is the product I want to have? What size of company? How many of them are there? And how do you reach them in an effective way? It's not from an investment standpoint. It's, again, these products, it's hard to get a lot of distribution.
Okay, they've got some funding, undisclosed, Wild Ventures out in Israel. So they're probably looking for some funding. So, Brian, what would you...
They need to have a story. They need to have a story in terms of traction. I would want to hear in terms of, like, okay, which customers they've talked to about using this, what they've said in terms of both good and bad, who their target audience is, and why they would actually switch to using this. How is the software deployed? What is their pitch for actually getting into these companies? Because that's the important part here, is where is your business coming from?
And I would also say really good case studies. I mean, it was cool that you showed his site, but I think you want to actually
see others.
You want to see sites. You want to say, like, here's 20 companies. I mean, my initial counsel with these guys would simply be pick 10 great sites or 5.
Right.
And have those sites say, we use this product, it completely changed our either UI design process, or the way we analyze this or that, or whatever the things are, and be able to have great in the early phases of any company, for these kinds of tools, I believe, it's not about appealing to a lot of people, it's about showing there's a type of person, of which there are many others out there you haven't gotten to yet, for whom you deliver a kick-ass product. that I think is the key in the early days.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Okay, New Economy, ClickTail. Which one would you bet on?
I like New Economy because I actually think I think ClickTail is interesting. I think it's a nice feature. I think New Economy is right on in terms of like the problem, and the problem is engagement, not page views. And I think that problem and understanding that problem. Who knows? There's a lot of people competing for that space, but the reality is it's a really interesting problem. I think is on the growth.
Engagement needs to be solved, and monetization of engagement needs to be solved. And any tools that are going to help you really understand what the engagement is of your site and therefore how to monetize it, has a chance to be big. So I like New Economy as well.
Me too. You're both right. New Economy. That's the one to bet on.
Yeah. Well, I think I wouldn't not bet on ClickTail. I think actually because it's kind of cool, but I think the trick is if I had to pick one or the other, I'd probably throw some funds against the first one.
Okay. All right. They already have funds. WPP, $3.3 million. So they're doing okay.
And the trick is when you're on the buy side, you wear T-shirts. When you're on the sell side, you wear Oxfords.
And when you're the host, you wear holy jeans. Okay, that's it for this week's.
You told me to dress down specifically.
I did.
Okay, that's it for this week's VaderBox. But Brian will join us next week again to be our guest host on VaderBox. And he will be wearing an Oxford, and Ezra will be wearing jeans. Yeah. And Ezra, thanks as always, VaderBox regular Ezra Roizen. I'm Bambi Francisco. Thanks for tuning in to this week's VaderBox, and we'll see you next time on Vader TV.
Awesome.